sorry, the camera angle's gonna be a little wonky, and but I'm on what is probably my last 10 miles with this truck. So the truck, and this has been a really good trip too, and I guess it's good that, you know, it's been a fairly decent, you know, last trip with the truck. I went all the way to Portland. There's like a scenery video that I'm going to make because I saved a ton of freaking, like, you know, video for that off of the dash cam and everything. But the entire time, from the time that I left, basically, Dallas, I left Dallas, and when I picked the truck up from the shop and I took it down to my parking spot in Waxahachie, it didn't do anything. I mean, I had the check engine light, which I've had for a little while. My oil gauge has been just pegged, and that's just because the oil pressure sensor needs to be replaced. That's not any real big deal, but I've had this check engine light that's been coming on, and it would only do it when the engine was revved up, so when I was under power, and would come on. So I really, honestly, when I looked it up, somebody said, well, if your oil pressure light is on and then the oil pressure starts to go up on the engine, and the engine sees the reading on the oil pressure gauge is not right, and so it puts on a light, sort of like a generic light for oil pressure, and it's because the gauge and whatever it's seeing are not matching. And so, like, okay, so kind of I was going to let that go. It was going to be the next thing that I fixed, you know, one of these days, but I wanted to get 2 or 3 weeks in with the truck before I put this truck back in the freaking shop again. And so I picked it up and I drove it down to my spot in Waxahachie, and I parked it. And there's a little shorty van over there. I need a shorty van. I don't need one, but I want one. Anyway, sorry if the camera angle's a little, I'm not centered when I see that, but, you know, there's not much I can do about it. Anyway, so I kind of like, so I drove it down to the spot, and I opened the hood and I checked everything, and nothing's leaking. Everything's fine. Like, okay, so my coolant leak on the water pump's gone. No other coolant leaks are showing up. Everything's good. You know, they had topped off with radiator fluid and everything, and I had another bottle if I needed it. Blah blah blah. So, I started out for, you know, Portland. I, you know, got up Sunday morning and went and picked up. Today's what, Monday? So this is Sunday last week. And so Sunday morning I went and I picked up this load, and I started out for Portland, and I drove until I got to Moriarty, New Mexico on Sunday. And about 20 miles from Moriarty, the dash lights up, and it's like, you're low on coolant. I'm like, really? You know, fuck, basically. And so I kind of pulled over, and the lights went out, and I thought, well, you know, it's 20 miles Moriarty, I'll go 20 miles. So I drove 20 miles Moriarty and I opened it up. Sure enough, I'm low on coolant, and it's leaking from the water pump again. So, desperate to try to figure out what it was and why I was. The only thing I could think is because the piece that's on the water pump is held in by bolts, and they're, you know, you tighten the bolts and it compresses the gasket down, and thus it's not supposed to leak. And so I was wondering if maybe there was a pressure issue. So I loosened the radiator cap and put radiator fluid in it. I went on down the road, and the light came on going down the road, and I was like, whatever, you know, I'll check it when we get, you know, when I get to my next spot. Well, the next spot was somewhere in, I think I stayed in Spanish Fork, Utah. So I get there, and I pull in, and it's a little low, so I added some coolant to it and just kind of topped it off. Like, okay, it's still leaking, but it's not as bad as it was, right? So, like, okay, I've got pressure in my cooling system, which I shouldn't have. So, you know, kind of thought about it, and, you know, and everything, and still was not connecting the light, the oil pressure light, to the coolant system problem. So I start looking up, you know, issues with that. I'm going to have to get back home, try and figure out what the coolant, you know, system, you know, can I limp along for the next 2 weeks with this coolant issue, and try to keep it from, you know, doing its thing, and that was my first thought, was I'll just live along for the next 2 weeks and make some money. Well, so I went from Spanish Fork, Utah to a truck stop called Space Age in Utah, or Oregon. And so I get there, and when I got there, I checked it, and I had slowed down because Oregon's got speed limits for trucks, and so does Idaho. And Utah's speed limits for trucks Utah's like 80 miles an hour. You can go 80 in a truck, so no problem there. But I slowed down, because of Idaho, and I slowed down because of Oregon and everything, and I had even less of a problem with coolant, missing from the reservoir. So I'm like, okay. So, well, then I get the next day and I go on into Portland, which was a short drive, and I drove like 65 miles an hour all the way. Just because A, it was raining, and B, I was, was kind of curvy going through the Columbia River Gorge, which I got video of, and we'll put that out after this one, probably. And so I'm doing all that, and I get to Portland, and I pop the hood and check it. I have lost no coolant. Remember, the cap's loose, still. So I've lost no coolant, and I'm like, okay. All right, so I didn't lose any coolant. And so I'm like, well, maybe it kind of, seeded. Maybe it just needed some time to seed, or maybe it finally seeded or whatever. So I kind of left it at that idea or whatever. And so I go on down the road. So I, do all my running around in Portland, don't have to add any coolant that day, and I do my running, back to, I think I was like all the way back to Laredo, Oregon or something like that. And anyway, so I go back to Laredo, Oregon, and I spend the night, didn't have to add coolant, right? Like, okay. So I get, and again, I'm going slow, and I get all the way through Idaho, and I get down to Utah, and I start booking. Boom. I hit 80 miles an hour. And I'm tearing along. The light comes back on and everything, and I'm like, all right. So, guy just keep going. And somewhere, I think that night I got to Green River, Utah. So I get to Green River, Utah, and I pop the hood, and sure enough, I've lost coolant, right? And so I add a little bit, and I think I bought another gallon of it somewhere in the middle of it, just so I had another gallon available. And so I get to Green River, Utah. Sure enough, I gotta add coolant. So I add coolant. Get up next morning, I think, and I added coolant and everything, and I went on down the road. So booking along, going through Moab and everything, and finally, somewhere in the middle of Moab, I'm starting to go like, I wonder if it's like a head gasket, because a head gasket, maybe that's why I've got pressure in the system. So I look it up, and it's like it could be a head gasket. Then somebody said something about a hole in the cylinder liner, and I thought, well, what's a cylinder liner? So I look up the cylinder liner, and basically, it's like if you don't know what a cylinder liner is, I'll try to explain it real quick. But a cylinder liner is there's the cylinder bore, and then they put a liner in, so that way you're not. It keeps the cylinder chamber cool, basically, as the cylinder pumps up and down. Do that again. So anyway. Gonna make a turn here. So anyway, and when you rebuild the engine, you take the cylinder liner out, and you put a new cylinder liner in, and you kind of get a new engine, sorta. But it helps to keep the cylinder liner helps keep the cylinder cool as it goes up and down. So anyway, it's a little bit of a tight turn to go right here. Anyway, I'm going to turn that off too. So I start thinking about it, and I'm going along and everything, and I'm kind of checking the trucker's report, looking up stuff for that. I'm checking the YouTube to see if I can find videos on it, and blah blah blah. And I finally realized yesterday, as I was on my way down to as I left Amarillo and I got down to Cisco, I finally realized that if I could keep the check engine light from coming on, I don't remember how I figured this out, but if I keep the check engine light from coming on, I was not going to lose coolant. So I ended up, what I ended up doing instead was, I just, every time the light came on, I would put it in neutral. I'd let it roll until the RPMs dropped to the point that the light went out. Okay. So that happened, and I have not had to put coolant in the truck for 3 days. So I started thinking about, the cylinder liner and the head gasket and the fact that I've got an oil pressure light when, the engine's above like 1500 RPM, and I'm losing coolant whenever that light's on. And I realized more than likely the problem I've got, if it's not a head gasket, and it could still be a head gasket, if the problem I've probably got, and I'm not a diesel mechanic, so don't quote me on this and say or anything like that. Don't take my word for it. Always go get your stuff looked at by a competent mechanic, because I'm an amateur mechanic. I know how to do some stuff, and I understand how things work. But anyway, so what I think I've got is a cracked cylinder liner. And I think if you have a cracked cylinder liner, more than likely that's probably why I'm getting pressure in the oil pan, and why I'm getting pressure in the cooling system. So, and I looked up the fix for that, and of course the fix is to rebuild the engine. And to rebuild an engine is about $28,000. Yeah, it's between 20 and 30 depending on what you have done. If you want to do a whole engine, it's closer to 50. And if you're wanting to do, if you're wanting to reman the engine, altogether, it depends on what all you have done. But this engine's got 709,000 miles on it. And they're going to want, even if it's just a head gasket, once it's off, they're going to want, you can't just put a new head on it and go down the road. Because it's not going to, you still got worn out parts underneath that. So, you have to replace, basically you have to rebuild the engine. So I'm looking at an engine rebuild, and I don't have money for an engine rebuild. There's no money in the bank for that. There's no money coming for that. There's nothing. So I was planning on, running 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 more weeks and putting it in for the oil pressure sensor. And that's that. So, the other part of the reason that I'm giving up the truck at this point is the gentleman that I'm buying the truck from. And one of the things I haven't said, he's a friend of mine, and so I was able to buy it from him because he's a friend of mine, which is really nice. And so, but unfortunately, part of the reason why he got to the point where he didn't want to be in the trucking industry anymore was because he kind of started out he started out late in the year. It was like October or something like that. And one of the things that I've learned is that you probably need to start, if you're going to start doing this, if you're going to buy, a truck or whatever, start going around, you need to start at the beginning of the busy season, which is probably around April, May, June, somewhere in there, so you can build up cash before you go into the off season, which is, October, September, October, November, December, blah, blah, blah. And so, he kind of started in October buying these trucks. Well, by the time I got in the truck, he'd had to he was continually making repairs on these trucks. This one, and he had another Kenworth exactly like it, just continually making repairs. So about the time I joined to work for him, he decided that he was going to buy 2 more trucks. So he bought 2 more trucks, but because apparently you can have 3 trucks running and 1 truck down, and then the 3 trucks running will pay for the 3 trucks running will pay for. They're so nice to me at this place. So they open the gate for me when I show up now. So, which is so cool. Anyway, so the deal is, where was I? Excuse me, what I was saying. I don't remember now. Anyway, the deal is that he got to the point where he had 4 trucks running, but then he had issues with drivers, so he wasn't making money, and so he ended up having to give up the 2 trucks he just bought, and he was so tired of the trucking industry that he wanted out. So that's when he came to me and said, I want to sell this to you. Well, he sold this one to me, and I've been able to make the payments, but the other one that he sold, that guy hasn't been able to make the payments. And so what happened was he's kind of gotten to the point where he's had to file for bankruptcy. And because of that, this truck is still in his name. So because he's having to file for bankruptcy, and there's a very good possibility that I'm going to have to give the truck back simply because he's had to file for bankruptcy, because he's going to have to give the truck back. Because of that reason, I've just decided to give the truck back to him and not put any more money into it. So that's what we're doing. And I'm here at my parking spot, and I'm going to park it, and I'm going to clean it out over the next couple of days and basically send it back to him with the issue that it's got, and he's going to send it back to the bank with the issue it's got, and that's just going to be the way that it is. And I am starting the paperwork on financing a new truck. Not a new truck, but a used truck, but another truck, basically. So that's kind of what's going on. Anyway, that's it. I'm going to pack my shit up, and hey, go sit down. There's no reason to be barking. I'm going to pack my stuff up today, and tomorrow I'll probably come back, clean the truck out, and then and that'll be it for Laredo. So be prepared for the last goodbye of this truck. And that's it. So I'll keep you guys up to date on what happens next. In the meantime, keep the shiny side up. See you down the road. It's going to be about a couple of weeks before I get a truck, so just remember that. And then while I'm doing that, I'll probably be working on the trolley. And if I can do some videos, you're not supposed to have your phone out at all while you're running the streetcar. So if I can do videos while I'm working with the trolley, I will try to do some videos. So, but other than that,